Well, from living roofs in North America, we're going to move the discussion to Asia and look at a vegetated roof in the Shanghai area. The similarity is really scale as much as anything else, but you'll see when we get into this, we used some of the ideas that were developed with the California Academy and moved those to China. So first of all, I wanted to see how many people in the audience have actually worked in China. Are there many here? There's a few. Are there people that want to work in China? Quite a few. It's been interesting for us because we were working in China well before the downturn in the U.S. economy. We were kind of globally diverse in the early 90s because of the downturn in the economy then, and we were working in many, many different countries. I've been working in Japan myself for over 20 years, and I don't have a single job right now that I'm working on that's in the US. I'm working in Taiwan, in Brazil, China, and Japan. So anyway, I'm going to show you a few statements. I didn't create these statements. I actually got these out of a business magazine, but I think they're appropriate because I've experienced some of these things, not all of them, but that's something that you have to go into China with open eyes. So this is very true that the Chinese understand us better than we understand them, and it's almost scary sometimes of where they want to go at such a quick pace because they want to catch up with the rest of the world in their living standards and human rights, for that matter. This is very true too. The Chinese will ask you for anything, but you just might be naive enough to agree to it. One of the things that we've done in China since the beginning is prepayment of fees. We don't work there unless we've got the money up front. And there's a lot of people who have gone into China with handshakes, even contracts of getting paid for their work and walked away empty-handed. So we've been fortunate to do this, and that's somewhat of an advantage of a larger firm and a demand for our services. You just got to be aware that it's, you're dealing with a lot of times government and politicians, and they'll say one thing and then turn around and say another thing. We've done competitions where we had full approval, and the next thing you know, we walk away and find out a mayor or a vice mayor or somebody doesn't like the color blue, and your whole concept was blue. So be prepared. This is very true. I mean, they can tell you something that's not true, but you can never tell them something that's not true. So it's better to withhold information than tell something that is false information. As I mentioned, contracts aren't a guarantee of anything. They love to negotiate. So you may agree to a price and you may provide the services, and then they'll want to give you half of what you agreed to be paid. So that's one of the other reasons that prepayment is the way to go if it's something that you can pull off. This is just the way it is, Nothing more needs to be said there. And then last but not least, if you decide to sell your soul, get a good price and do something in your retirement to make up for it. A small anecdote, we have a project in Hainan, the southern island, and it's a resort project, and when we were negotiating the contract, the person that we're dealing with demanded that we include in our fees a car for him, a brand new Audi. And so from that day forward, we called him Audi Lin. And what we told him when he asked for a car is, should we ask your boss what color that he would prefer the car to be? And that kind of put him in his place. If somebody has control of your contract, a lot of times they'll make demands for their own individual gain, and you don't really know if they're representing their bosses. So this is the other thing. It doesn't affect us as much as it affects people that develop widgets and computers and things like that. But there already is a company, if you search for SWA Group in China, there's another firm called SWA Group in China with on an American passport. So to be a foreign company in China, it has to be under certain documentation, and there are other, they will copy your firm and try to use it to their advantage. So this is a comparison between the US project, the Academy you saw before lunch. It's got a little bit more information relative to our fees, and comparing it to a project in Shanghai. So I call it lost or found in translation because I think the nice thing that came out of this is it's a very successful, very beautiful living roof project. It just got there in a little bit different route. So you remember the Academy from before lunch. I always like to show this slide again because it's just fun to see it transform from ugly concrete to what we think is already an international architectural icon, and a lot of that has to do with the BNA, as they're called, the big name architect. This was our fees for California Academy of Sciences. It seems like a lot of money for 7.5 acres. It was 5 phases. 2 of the phases were fixed fee, which we overran, I think, both of those fixed fee phases. And then the last 3 phases, we were able to perform our services on an hourly basis. And what was nice about this is every time we were asked to be out there, it allowed us to bill that with very little upset. 30% of their total fee was during construction, which is pretty good that we had over nearly $200,000 to be out there and deal with mock-ups and when the architect was in town and for all of those things. Now, this is our client on the California Academy. It was the Board of Trustees, but the main character was Dr. Kochalek. And he was the one that actually pushed the project towards getting LEED certification. He was very much into the Rocky Mountain Institute, and he was the one that Renzo really didn't necessarily want to pursue the LEED certification. The client wanted to, and I want to always give them credit for it, not necessarily the design architect. Dr. Kochalek has since left. He left actually the year before the project opened, but he is now the director of natural history at University of Colorado in Boulder. So, and he is a scientist. His forte is diatoms, I think. This is the new executive director of California Academy, also a scientist. I think he's an electrical engineer, but and he very much has carried on the torch towards sustainability. And as I mentioned, he came on at completion of the base building and prior to the museum opening, and has actually been on several panels with us, discussion panels about the project and the end user. The architect I mentioned is Renzo Piano Building Workshop, the BNA. Very gracious, spoke very good Italian with the hands. And then the team, I mentioned earlier that Gordon Chong Partners was the local architect that worked with Renzo Piano, and we still have a very, very strong relationship with several of the people that were from that office but have left since it was purchased by Stantec, which is a very, very large architectural firm. Rutherford Chakeen were the civil engineers, ourselves, Rana Creek, and Think at the bottom was the people that developed the exhibits inside the building. So we're going to China next, and this project is nearly 4 acres of living roof, and the design for this project actually started during construction of California Academy of Sciences. So this project was completed in 2010. just 2 years after California Academy opened. So this was 5 years start to finish versus the 9 to 8 years that it took for the California Academy to reach its opening day from the inception of design. So here's a comparison of fees. We took this through design development. You can't do CDs in China. It's not allowed. They are actually trying to disallow doing design development. So I don't know how you can design something and not develop that design in China, but they're trying to hold back as much fee as they possibly can get. During construction, the architect on this building, you see in a moment, was Morphosis out of LA. They had full-time services during construction. They had staff on site full-time, and they asked us to provide the same services towards the end of the project for 6 months. They wanted somebody, from our office there full-time. They wanted a principal or a partner to come once a month to review the progress. And that all added up to, with housing and everything else and airfares, to a whopping nearly 630,000 US dollars. And then they decided, well, maybe we don't need that. So we got nothing as far as a fee during construction. So it was like walking away from something that you had spent a lot of time developing. And the DD that we call it Super DD because it really is, they really are CDs without the translation, basically. So anyway, the absorbed expense, that $12,000 you see, that was a request of the architect to come see the project before they completed it. And so we did that as a favor to Tom Main and Morphosis. This is the client, not a scientist. The company, Giant Interactive, develop and manage online games, video games. Just a bit more of an eccentric than our Academy staff, and somewhat reserved. Someone commented, I wasn't in this meeting, but someone commented at this meeting that he's very strange. He always dresses in white, including white shoes, sneakers basically, and he would drink directly out of that teapot. He'd put the spout in his mouth and kick it back. So, very different. The architect, Tom Main, Morphosis, and we'd actually, the designer in our office was out of Los Angeles, Gerdo Aquino, and he had known Tom and done some competitions with him. But again, this is the BNA on the project, so that's the commonality between the two. And perhaps less reserved than Renzo Piano, but at least we could see his eyes, unlike the client who always wore sunglasses indoors and out. And then the intensity of the architect in one of the workshop meetings, his eyes like laser pointer. Then this was the 2005 kickoff meeting. This is post-site master planning. We had done the master planning with a local architect, and the way we got this project to begin with wasn't because it was a green roof or living roof. It was because our designer, Gerdo Aquino, had gone to school at GSD, Harvard, with this young Chinese architect who went back to Beijing and started his own firm and got the commission to do the master plan for Giant. So it's who you know, not what you know sometimes. So the team here was Giant Investment Group, the client, and Philip Lau was the young man that our Gerdo Aquino knew. Morphosis was brought in to design the headquarters building. Michael Chan was going to design as you'll see, the chairman's residence, ourselves, and then other players. This was during that workshop. You can see our friend again there sitting overview with the sunglasses on in the background, and then some images on the site. So I'm going to take you through design real quickly. This was the pre-workshop site plan that had evolved, and it was relatively rigid, a rigid angular scheme. That island in the middle is the headquarters building. The little building to the left with the private road, that was going to be the chairman's residence. This is what came out of that workshop with morphosis. You still see the island, but it's a very much organic plan. And I think somebody described it as snake-like, and that was the wrong thing to say in China. And so it became a dragon, not a snake. And a landscape, not a roof. So this is a close-up of that dragon-like element, which was the chairman's office was on the piece that cantilevered out over the lake. The living roof, as I mentioned, is 164,000 square feet, and in this diagram that shows the folds, the light green is the green roof on structure, and the dark green areas are actually on grade, but designed and executed to look like the living roof, an extension of those folded planes. This is some of the analysis, the drainage, the slope, and the exposures. And you can see in the slope, the real steep areas were over to the west of the project, and there were a couple of pieces that were over 50 degrees that some of them were executed and some weren't. Those very thin little notches were actually left untreated. This is the planting diagram. It looks pretty simple when you see it in implementation, but there were 11 plants that we used and 6 different groups. There were like 5 to 7 species in each group, and the groups were designated by orientation, moisture requirements. I don't need to necessarily go through the 11 plants unless people are interested, but some of the usual suspects, the sedum, and some other plants that would be considered Chinese medicinal plants, like the herba, lamb's ear, a few other things like that. So this is where the plans were very similar. You can see this was the detailing that in our DD package, the Super DD, where we were looking at how to deal with the various ridges and valleys, and then also you see on the far right the gabion drainage intercept drain detail that we developed for the Academy. So this is just a blow up of that. And you see here the soil depth was nearly 1 foot, 300. So this got pretty deep and could be arguably an intensive versus extensive roof. Cutaway section, one of the things that we wanted to achieve here that they wouldn't allow us to do with the Academy was provide some sort of support or for the slope. So we added these concrete cleats into the system, and I don't have any photographs of those actually in place, so I don't know if they occur to the degree that we show them in the sections, but we did get to build something into the roofs that allowed some purchase on some of these slopes. So construction started in 2008. This is the Academy steel, very, very neat and tidy site. Fairly light steel structure. And then the construction site for Giant Group. Now what was interesting is that we're in China quite often, so there were times where we could actually go visit the site even though we weren't being paid to do it. We could go out, and since we knew the gentleman from Morphosis, the architects from the US, we were able to actually go out and photograph and see the progress as it was happening, but we had no input into beyond observation. You can see here, this is the steel and the formwork, and you can see from the left-hand side that how deep that steel is relative to the fact that we've got a much deeper section of media, almost a foot of soil going on this structure. So this was the Morphosis field office. That's Tom Kane in the center. The gentleman to his left is in the black polo is Gerdo Aquino. the lead designer on the project. He's also our relatively new president in the company, which is very exciting for us. We've got a chairman, a CEO, a president. We've got several layers, but it's good to have a very young, energetic president leading the firm. And then the construction in 2010. This is when we went and actually looked at it. We're actually invited to look at it and comment, and it was well underway at this point in time. Just wanted to remind you of our propagation and review of plant materials at Rana Creek for Academy. Quite clean, well-maintained, good discussion group. This is the giant site with the plant mock-ups on site in a kind of a mass unit Quonset. This is looking at the 6 different groups of planting done in the media that was not to our specification. It was basically a specification that was developed by the local design institute. The gentleman that's leaning on the left there was a local professor, I believe, and part of the LDI's entourage. So this is reviewing with Ing Yu, one of the designers from LA, reviewing that plant mix, and you can see that the material is doing quite well in these planter boxes. So this gave us hope. You know, we had very little control over the methodology and the media, but it seemed like things were going to work out. There's vigor, and the coverage was encouraging. This shows just a close-up. You can see some of the sedum in there, carex, lamb's ear. The variegated plant, I think, is the variegated Vinca major. And this is the media, which we couldn't really identify because every bag was a different bag. They just bag things in whatever bag they can find. There's no labels. On the lower left, the material, there's 2 different materials there, and the one on the right is ground up peanut shells, peanut husks, and the one on the right is rice hulls. And we're not sure what if any, inert material or mineral material they were using, other than perhaps it looked like expanded clay. So this is an area that had already been planted, and then you can see where the area in the foreground is actually on grade before they actually put any of the living roof media on that area and planted the on grade section. So this was good that we were able to see kind of the substructure and the gabions and how the drainage was coming down to this pickup drain at the bottom of the valley here before it went into the on grade portion. And this isn't something that we designed, this drain. Basically, LDI developed it, which was good because this would have just been a natural bog area where the material would have hit that grade area and just sat there, even though it was still at grade. That's kind of looking east back towards the chairman's wing of the building. And the planting group in the foreground is different than the slopes beyond facing us. So you can see this material in the foreground here is a different mix than the material that's facing us. So slogging over the roof, and you start to get a sense of the scale. That area in the back that's cut out, that's a public street that bisected the property, and it was quite a bit of discussion on how to actually do this building and cross a public road, but they were able to get it done. It's just, again, you know, it's who you know. This Mr. Shi was quite connected, so he was able to get approval of his building spanning this public right-of-way. This gives you a sense of the scale of the roof, and what's really beautiful about this is just how the architecture just blends so well into the folded panels of the living roof. So we saw an area that was pretty much already planted. We couldn't do or say anything about it, and then we hit the areas that hadn't been planted yet. You can see that the soil's been, the media's been placed, and here you can see some of the distribution of some plant material in the red bins. I think probably, can't tell from here, but it looks like lamb's ear there. more of the layout. You can see they're planted up to kind of halfway across, and then there's more areas that aren't planted yet. This was relatively clean. The ground level was a lot messier than the roof level. And then we got to the precipice of this back slope, and you look at that aspect diagram and you realize, well, there were slopes that were 50 plus degrees, and this was a 53-degree slope that they'd actually shot this material onto. And why it's staying there, I don't know. But it is, and you'll see photos later of this same slope, but it just, we didn't see them attempting to plant this or how they were going to plant it, but it got planted. So then we sent our photographer there on a photography mission in August 2011, and so these were the first photos, very close to completion of the project. This is looking across the lake at the building, and you can see the folded panels, and it looks like areas that are denuded on the left. That's actually a flush of the pink evening primrose. The chairman's, the dragon's head. And again, the material in the back, that flush of color is the primrose. You can see a little bit of it here, a little closer up. A little bit of a lamb's ear sticking its head up there, and again, the Oenothera. And then you're starting to see some of these steeper slopes on the left. And in this particular panel, there was a woody plant, a spirea, which in reality was probably a good idea. We had the depth, we had 12 inches of depth, and having that root system was probably a good thing relative to the steepness of the slope, having something that had a little bit stronger root system than what you were getting from the herbaceous perennials. There's your Oenothera flush again. What's hard to tell here is there's a part of this area where the bridges go into the ground that is actually on grade, and I think this is quite successful in seeing that there really didn't seem to be kind of a break in the imagery between on grade and on structure. That is looking back at that 53-degree slope. So it did get planted, and it's all staying in place. This is kind of a backside of the building. That big cutout window on the right is into the large swimming pool area. And I think there are ducks in the pond. But then just recently, we're pretty good at getting our photographers back to these sites over a period of time, but sometimes it's the only way that we get to see the project again ourselves. We don't have the luxury of coming back to the projects on any analysis, but our photographer gets to go back. So this is just, I believe, this October or November, he just came back, and so he's probably showing this photography to our partners at home during our semi-annual meeting this week. And so again, you see the structure across the lake. You see now how those different materials, doesn't have the same flush of flowers because it's a different time of year, but you can see how those different panels that had different designations or groups are starting to kind of show themselves a little. And if you look one direction, it looks one way, and if you look another direction, it looks totally different. It's kind of interesting optical illusion depending on where you are on the roof. There's the building holding up well, even though it's kind of a deadly looking Darth Vader building. Goes along with the chairman. And this is our photographer's assistant, Ing, and we always kind of kid him because he's in all of these photos. So we're always saying, where's Ing, instead of where's Waldo. See, he ends up being the scale in all of these photographs. He's actually going over the land bridge. This is the piece that goes over that public street. Some close-ups. The carex seems to be doing fine. The Oenothera's coloring a little bit there. You can see some of the ajuga and the low sedum. But from these photos, if I go back one, you can see that there's very little of the media exposed. So it's maintaining itself pretty well in terms of weeds because it just is so vigorous. This again is looking back at that 53-degree slope, nothing failing. You'll see in this next photo, this is looking back at this same slope, and the one thing that did fail in this project was the manufactured wetland in the foreground. This is a big concrete basin with the planter pots you can see there. That's all supposed to be underwater, but the thing doesn't hold water. It holds water to about a foot, and then the rest of it leaks. So it was a concept that relied on the constructability and the construction practices that basically failed. And this was a big part of the concept of the sustainable site, was to have this manufactured wetland around the building, but it doesn't hold water. So the roof is a success, but the project in total isn't successful. This is looking back towards the type of development that you saw from some of Ed's images. These are buildings that are under construction, all housing that's going to be coming up around this very suburban complex. So it's quite nice that at least here, where there isn't a lot of buildup immediately around the project, there will be. And so this is really going to be one of those environmental lungs in an area that could be very, very densified in the near future. So I wanted to show just a parting shot of the academy. This was 5 years after installation versus that project, which was only 2 years in the ground. So these are the two projects side by side. So far, a success, and we don't know what they're spending on maintenance, but labor's cheap in China. They probably have a crew of hundreds that go across this landscape without batting an eye. And so that's the presentation for a comparison between the US and China, and we'd love to talk more about it, but I'm just about out of time, I believe.